to be with me in the air. Where could I go deep within? Needing a friend? Well, I'm needing a friend to be with me in the end. Where could I go but deep within? Where could I go but deep within? Yeah, go deep within. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, good morning, everyone, and happy Sunday. Happy Sunday to you. So let me ask you a question. How many of you would like to be happier this year? You know, I happen to think that I'm a fairly happy person a good bit of the time, but I also know that there's a possibility for me to be happier, and I believe there's a possibility for each of us to be happier. And we're going to do a 3-week series based on a wonderful book called Happy This Year. Hello, Echo. Happy This Year, and by Will Bowen. And many of you are familiar with Will Bowen's work, who wrote an amazing and wonderful work called A Complaint-Free World. Some of you took part in that program with us a while back, A Complaint-Free World. And kind of the essence of a complaint-free world is the less complain, the more happy you get. So we're not going to go through all of that at this point, but we're actually going to take it to the next level. Is what are some specific things what are ways that we can really move into a higher level, a higher state of what we call happiness? Well, you know, in preparing for it today, I came across there was an optimistic farmer who just couldn't wait to get up out of the bed in the morning and just get up in the morning and just say, "Good morning, God, it's just a great and glorious day." And then he had a neighbor who was kind of just the opposite of that. She would get up in the morning and say, "Good God, it's morning." You know, and so, you know, they had this little thing going back and forth, and he kept trying to help bring her up, her energy up, you know, and trying to kind of bring her into a little happier space in life. And so, you know, the sun would come out and be a beautiful sunrise. He said, "Oh, did you see that beautiful sunrise day?" And she said, "Yeah, it's going to be so hot it's going to burn up the crops." You know, and he said, "Well, you know." And then later on in the afternoon, the rain came along, and he said, "Oh, isn't that wonderful? The rain came, and it's just feeding the corn and feeding all the crops. Isn't that magnificent?" Yeah, we're gonna, if the rain keeps raining, we're gonna wish we had bought, you know, rain insurance. And you know, he said, "Oh man, there's got to be something to, you know, help bring her up a little bit, you know." And so he got this dog. He found and bought this amazing dog. This dog was a just absolute miraculous dog to do all kinds of amazing feats and tricks and stuff. And so he wanted to show her, and so he said, "Would you come with me? I want you to see what this dog can do." So he took a stick and he threw it out on the water, and this dog ran out on top of the water, ran out and grabbed the stick and walked on top of the water and came back. And he said, "Boy, what do you think about that?" And he says, "This is what I figured. Not much of a dog, can't even swim." So George Sand says, "Happiness lies in the consciousness we have of it, and by no means in the way the future keeps its promises." That's a great quote, and let me read it again. "Happiness lies in the consciousness we have of it, and by no means in the way the future keeps its promises." I'm going to suggest to you, and Will Bowen starts off by saying, it's your destiny to be happy. It is your destiny to be happy. You can become measurably and sustainably happier each year. And becoming happier, though, however, does take some effort. It does take some effort, but you probably don't realize that you're already happy. There's a level of happiness that we all have. And we are on a gradient, you might say, of happiness at different times, but there is a level of happiness that runs through our life experiences, and we can adjust that. Do you realize it? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. You'll often he compares becoming a happier person by becoming more physically fit, which am intending to do myself. But one of the things he points out is that, you know, it's a great metaphor. When you're physically fit, there are two components basically to determine your fitness level. And nutrition is one of them. What you put into your body is one of them. And the exercise, what you do with your body, what you put out from your body in many ways in terms of energy, also determines your physical fitness. Well, he says your emotional fitness is the same way. Your happiness level is the same way. What you put into your thoughts and feelings and emotions will actually have an effect on on the level of your happiness in life. And at the same time, what you put out in the world also has an effect on your happiness in life. And so it's important for us to pay attention to those two factors in what's going on in our life and world. It's a new year, right? You know, that last week we did the wonderful Burning Bowl service about letting go of those things that are no longer serving us, and then also bringing into our awareness those things we want to experience more of. And so one of the things he talks about is this idea of New Year's resolutions. How many of you make New Year's resolutions? How many people do? It's a common practice. The U.S. government says, a website, in most common New Year's resolutions in the United States are drink less alcohol, eat healthy food, get a better education, get a better job, get fit, lose weight, manage debt, manage stress, quit smoking, reduce and reuse and recycle, save money, take a trip, volunteer to help others. Did you notice that none of those were to become happier? Isn't that interesting? And yet each and every one of those is for the purpose of trying to become more happy. He says basically it's to feel better. And to feel better, to enjoy life more equals to be happier. So first steps towards our happiness. Happiness is, first of all, and recognition of this is one of the keys in really being able to shift and elevate our level of happiness in life. Happiness is an internal process. It's an internal process. We often seek changes in the outer world thinking it will impact our sense of well-being in some way. But in reality, studies have found that it's actually changing our internal state of being that changes our experiences out in the world. It's the other way around. Changing out here doesn't make us happy, but changing in here makes the world change. And so becoming happier personally positively impacts our health, our relationships, our finances, our careers, and much more. It affects not only us, but it affects those around us. There's an energy and a vibration that we put out that actually can help to lift the energy of those around us. And so even increasing our level of happiness, even a little bit each day, can really move us into a state where we're actually helping to make a difference, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of others around us. So the first step in happiness, he says, is to embrace the truth, one, that you're already happy. There's a level of happiness that you have right now. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to look at and discern a little bit about how we can get clear on what that is. It's like fitness, and so part of our work is to become happily fit. So, however, unlike fitness, a person's level of happiness, it's subjective. In fact, many scientists refer to the term happiness as subjective well-being. Let me say that again because it's a great term. Subjective well-being. It's basically your view of your level, of your place, your state of well-being. So what is happiness? There's lots of suppositions and a lot of misunderstandings about what happiness truly is, and people try to define it in many different ways, and I came across some wonderful quotes that I could have just sat here and done quote over quote over quote about happiness that would have been really very valuable, but I want us to really move into an awareness of what's possible for us. So what is happiness? He says the most useful definition and it's one agreed upon by neuroscientists, psychiatrists, behavioral economists, positive psychologists, and Buddhist monks, is more like satisfied or content than happy in its strict bursting with glee sense. He goes on to say, glee, bliss, elation, jubilation, and joy are the great symphonic crescendos of life. As magnificent as they are, we should seek them out and enjoy them to their fullest. It's not realistic to think that we can live in a state of never-ending euphoria. And so he quotes, there's another quote from J.D. Salinger. He says, the most singular difference between happiness and joy is that happiness is a solid and joy is a liquid. Happiness is the beach, and joy is the waves. Happiness is an emotional foundation of our lives, whereas joy ebbs and flows and is dependent on what occurs in our lives. Now, you could possibly, in all honesty, you could probably reverse these definitions. You could possibly say that true joy is this constant state, and happiness is something that goes up and down. But we're going to work with his definition at this point, if you guys are okay with that. So many psychologists believe that we have a happiness set point, a level of happiness that we continually return to regardless of what transpires in our day-to-day lives. And, you know, this is a good thing in many ways, because when we find ourselves faced with challenges and difficulties, we have a tendency to actually afterwards to begin to move back into that state, that level of happiness that we're comfortable with, that we're used to. And at the same time, though, we would love to have, when we have more positive experiences, to have ourselves move up into a little bit higher level and not necessarily always come back down to that level, wouldn't we? And that's part of what we're working toward. And that's the purpose of this series, is to help raise our overall level of happiness in our experiences, to raise our set point of how we are experiencing happiness in our world. See, we each have an emotional governor. When I was in college, I had a summer job. I used to work for a bus company that built buses, and I used to work in the factory and help build the buses. And but one of the summer jobs I had was to deliver the buses, and I really loved that job because I never really traveled much out of the state of Arkansas, and I got a chance to drive buses up to St. Louis and Chicago and some out to the East Coast, and it was, you know, it was fun. It was great. I was, you know, a young guy and get to travel some. But one of the things about the buses was that was a little challenging for me at times, was that the buses had governors on them. They knew I was kind of young, and they wanted to make sure that I kind of stuck within the limits of the speed limit. And so they had a governor, and the governor would only allow the bus to go 50 miles an hour. And the speed limit at that time, most highways, was like 55. And I was thinking, well, why didn't they at least make it 55, you know? And what I found, of course, is that if you're on flat ground, this thing, you can put it to the floor and it'll go 50 miles an hour. And if you are going up a hill, you can put it to the floor and it goes about 40 miles an hour. But if you're going down a hill, you put it to the floor and you can go up to about 60 to 65 miles an hour. Now, this made the trip pretty long, but, you know, the governor is a way that it regulates, and our emotional state is like that also. We actually have an internal governor. Do you realize that? That's that set point that we're talking about. And, you know, when things are going well in life, we're going downhill, things can really roll, and we get up to 65 miles an hour, and we're feeling pretty good, and life is great and wonderful. And then we find ourselves going uphill. There's challenges or difficulties that we face. We sometimes find ourselves down at about 40 to 45 miles an hour. And so, you know, it's just an awareness to know that all the ups and downs in life are not necessarily the level that we are at in different circumstances and situations are not really determined by what's going on out here in the world. The ups and downs don't necessarily change our set point, but we can actually improve our set point by doing things that really help us to move our awareness and our energy to a higher place. Came across this saying, and I've read this in a number of different places. It's been attributed to a lot of different people, Gandhi for one. He says, "Watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. And watch your habits, for they become character. And watch your character, for they become your destiny." And so part of what our work is to really pay attention and notice what is going on in us in terms of our happiness. Sometimes just the very act of paying attention to our level of happiness can actually help us to shift it. You're aware of that? We're going to talk about that a little more. You know, George Carlin, we're going to talk a little bit about what is it that brings us happiness. Well, I'm going to suggest to you that's kind of a misunderstanding. Ultimately, nothing ever brings you happiness. Do you realize that? Nothing ultimately brings you happiness. You bring happiness to things, to circumstances, to situations. And part of our work is to learn how our internal sense of awareness and control begins to affect and change what goes on in our lives and world. We try to get changes in our lives and world in order for us to raise our level of happiness, but it's really the other way around. George Carlin says, trying to be happy by accumulating possessions is like trying to satisfy hunger by taping sandwiches all over your body. We have a tendency to think that having more of something will make us happier. Money is a great example of that. We happen to think that somehow if we had more money, we'd be happier. There was a minister speaking about all this idea that somehow money is going to bring us happy and make us happier, and he said, money can't buy happiness. It can't buy laughter, and money can't buy love. He said, what if I were to offer you $1,000 to not love your mother and father? And a hush fell over the crowd. And finally, one small young voice spoke up and says, how much would you give me not to love my big sister? Well, a study in Science magazine said that the belief that high income is associated with good mood is a widespread but mostly illusory idea. People with above average income are relatively satisfied with their lives but are barely happier than others in a moment-to-moment experience and they tend to be a little bit more tense and do not necessarily spend more time in particularly enjoying the activities. So the point is, it's been shown that there's a certain level of money that can actually increase our experiences of comfort and well-being in life. But after a certain level, and I'm not going to say what that is, but I remember the article. I don't want to say what it is because sometimes we put those things in our brain and say, well, that's the level that I have to be at in order to be happy. The truth is, over average, after a certain amount of level of income and money, you don't get any happier. It doesn't increase in any way. So it's valuable to know that, one, there's this idea somehow that money is going to make us happy. And I'm going to suggest to you it's actually probably the other way around. The happier we are, the more likely we're actually to draw to us and attract to us those things that will allow money to come into our experiences. We're clearer in our thinking. We make decisions that actually are coming from a more clear space, and we actually will draw to us those things, not just money, but those things that actually reinforce that inner state of well-being, of happiness. This is the law of attraction. We get this is what Abraham Hicks has been trying to teach us. When we change our energy inside ourselves, we actually vibrate at a level that we are like a magnet that draws to us those things that will actually enhance and reinforce that level of state of being, of feeling, of energy. We're talking about, of course, our higher attitudes. When we shift our attitude, those things around us will actually begin to change. The king of Bhutan some years ago coined a phrase in his country, and they actually apparently do some research and measure this. He coined the phrase, the gross national happiness. We have a really important phrase in our country called the gross national product. You guys familiar with that, right? It's like whatever we're putting out there, whatever we're making, that's in a physical way. But this is really measuring how happy are the people in our country. And he says that this is the primary purpose of our government, is to raise the level of the gross national happiness. I thought, wow, what a great idea, what a great mission. In his book, The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks explains that each of us has what's called an upper limit switch. There's a certain amount of happiness that we will actually allow ourselves to have. Do you realize that? We start getting actually uncomfortable, believe it or not, when we go beyond that switch. And so part of our practice and part of what we're going to be looking is what are things that we can do that can actually elevate the level of that switch that allows us to really truly experience a greater level of happiness or a sense of well-being in our lives. Does all this mean that we can't have money? Well, of course not. It doesn't mean that. And in fact, don't hear this, that I'm saying, that you need to get rid of all your money in order to be happy. That is not the case. Less money doesn't make you happier either, folks. I got news for you. I've done both, and it doesn't, it really doesn't. It doesn't make you happier. So one of the things that Will talks about in his book is that spirituality really becomes the bridge between money and happiness. He says, are we doomed to be like the legendary Greek King Midas, who has given the power to turn anything in touch into gold, but starved to death? And the point, of course, is no. Not surprisingly, interestingly enough, he quotes something here from Christian Science Monitor. He says that as China becomes more wealthy and worldly, it actually is also experiencing a growth, an explosion in spirituality. And one of the points that he makes is that in order for us to truly elevate our level of happiness, we really do need to have both of them rise together. And if we focus simply on raising one without the other, then we actually are not really moving our level up. We're actually kind of bouncing up and down. So it's really valuable to recognize that our spirituality is an essential part of our physical well-being, but our physical well-being is also an essential part of our spiritual well-being. Make sense? They're not mutually exclusive. So, before we really can begin to determine how happy we are, we have to make a decision. And one of the decisions we have to make for ourselves is, how happy do you want to be? How happy do you want to be? Interesting question. How many of you asked yourself that question before? How happy do I really want to be? And part of our process is to begin to move into an awareness of that state that we would like to experience more of. We need to choose happiness. There's an amazing and wonderful work out there by Barry Neil Kaufman. Highly recommend this one also. I could have done in fact, I may do a class on this one. And it's called Happiness is a Choice. And it's a fantastic work that really helps us to know that our way of looking and seeing and thinking, and it gives us great awarenesses on how we can shift our way of thinking and seeing so that we are experiencing a deeper and a fuller experience of happiness. Another great work on happiness. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." All these things he's talking about are house and clothing and all of those things, whatever. If we seek first the kingdom, these also will be added to us. It's kind of the same understanding here. Regardless of your religious leanings, you know that Jesus referred to the kingdom of God, and that heaven, that state of heaven, it must certainly be a place where happiness reigns. And he goes on to say, in Luke chapter 17, verse 21, Jesus tells us exactly where this happy place is to be found, doesn't he? What was that song we were singing earlier? Something about going within. The kingdom of God is within you. That state of heaven is not some place that we go to when we die. It is a state of awareness of our connection, our oneness with the source of our well-being, which is the divine, which is spirit, which is God. The secret to happiness, according to Frances Folks in a wonderful unity book called Effectual Prayer, she says the secret of happiness is in the kingdom of heaven that is within you. So within you exists a level of happiness, and together what we're going to do is we're going to help bring that forward. We're going to help bring that out more. We're going to help bring it into our awareness more. There's a story of Siddhartha Gautama. And the legend says that the young prince was a master archer. And he won every contest, every archery contest that he won. He always won first prize. And one of his competitors just one day was in a competition and threw down his bow and says, "I demand you tell me how you are able to hit the target every time. How are you able to win every time?" And Siddhartha smiled and said, "Well, I aim for the target." And he got mad and he says, "What do you mean you aim for the target?" "Of course, I aim for the target also. I always aim." He said, "No, you aim for the medals. I aim for the target. You aim for the medals, and you don't always hit the target. But I aim for the target, and I often get the medals. And part of our focus here today is to aim for the target. So what if you actually made the choice, made the decision, made the intention that your target was to be happier? What do you think might happen? What do you think would happen if you decided that you want to be happier? Now, sometimes we come from that place of wanting to be happier and kind of thinking, well, this is what I've got to have in order to be happy. And it's erroneous thinking. The reality is, happiness truly is a decision that we're making. What if you were to decide right now, could I be happier? And what if you said yes? I can tell you that things will begin to shift for you. Henry David Thoreau said, the secret of achievement is to hold a picture of yourself, let me read this again. The secret of achievement is to hold a picture of successful outcome in the mind. I'll read that quote again because it's an important component here. The secret of achievement is to hold a picture of successful outcome in the mind. And Immanuel Kant said, happiness is not an ideal of reason, but of imagination. So, can you see yourself being happier? Can you have an image and a view of yourself as a happier person? It's just like setting any other goal that we have in life, but I'm going to suggest to you it's probably one of the most significant and one of the most important that we can set for ourselves. It's one of the most important visionings we can do. Dostoevsky said, man only likes to count his troubles. He doesn't calculate his happiness. So we're going to take a minute and we're going to calculate our happiness. So I'm going to ask our ushers to pass out a card and a sheet of paper with some exercises on it. I'm going to give you homework. We're going to put you to work here. And as you receive the card, one of the things I want you to do, there's an explanation of the exercise. You can read it later. But what I'm going to ask you to do is on this card, from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning totally unhappy, 10 meaning ecstatically happy, I want you to write a number down on that card. Who needs a pen? Raise your hand if you need a pen. So I'm going to have you write down this number in 2 places. I want you to write it on the card. As people get it, you can do that. And I also want you to write it at the top of the piece of paper. There's an exercise called Just How Happy Are You? And you can write it at the top of that page. So we're going to do a little experiment with this also. So on the note card, I'm going to ask you just to write the number between 1 and 10 of how happy you are. How happy you feel you are today. And just be honest with yourself. Just an honest evaluation of what is your state and your level of happiness today.
What is the low number?
1 is unhappy, totally unhappy. And 10 is ecstatically happy. And just write down the number. And then write that same number at the top of the page. Now, when we receive our offering today, I'm going to ask you to put the card, don't put your name or anything on it, and we don't need any kind of identification. We're just going to see what the general sense is here. So what we're going to do is collect these and just kind of get an average level of the happiness of our group today. And then we're going to go through and look at and see how that might have changed. So I want you to write the number today on the exercise also, because part of the exercise for you this week, your work this week is to begin to evaluate and notice your level of happiness. And so for each day, we're going to ask you at 3 different times a day to write down a number that shows where you are in terms of your level of happiness. And he recommends doing the Dr. Pepper thing. How many of you even remember what I'm talking about? 10, 2, and 4. Remember Dr. Pepper? He gives an explanation on your sheet there. I won't go into it, but 10, 2, and 4. So at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 4 o'clock, set an alarm of some kind, set something that will remind you to just check in with your level of happiness and see where you're at with that. And see how, what's going on in that moment. There's a saying that I found actually, I really learned this actually when I was working at Microsoft. And one of the things I remember reading somewhere is that what can't be measured can't be changed. What can't be measured can't be changed. I want you to think about that for a moment. And part of our intent here is to, in some way, to measure where we're at. Because we won't even know whether it's changed or not unless we've actually seen something that shows that it's somehow different. So that's the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to make us conscious and aware.
Do we date this?
Actually, that would be good. Put the date, thank you, Julie, on the card, and actually on both of them, put the date. That'd be a great thing to, and actually get yourself your own card or whatever, a sheet of paper, whatever, and track through the week, each day, 3 times a day, your level of happiness. You can do it 10, 2, and 4. It doesn't have to be exactly that time. But set 3 times throughout the day, where you recognize and you look at what your happiness level is. Now, the second part of that is at the end of the week, next Sunday, before you come, calculate all of the things that you've written down through the week and just get an average of what your average has been for the week. There's instructions on the sheet that tell you how to do that. So that's another piece of the exercise. And then the next part of the exercise is a buddy. You want to have a buddy to help you, to remind you, to also to support you in your level of happiness and raising your level of happiness. And at the same time, you're going to be doing the same for them. So this could be someone here in the congregation. It could be a family member. It could be someone at work. It could be just a friend in the neighborhood. Someone that you feel like would participate with you in this exercise of 10, 2, and 4. Just setting noticing and recording your level of happiness. Deepak Chopra said, simply by becoming more aware, you become a powerful agent of change. And there's no need to force anything, only to expand our awareness. So part of our work here is to really just simply make us more conscious and aware of our level of happiness. So will you join me in that? So the thing I'll ask you about the card, when we do our collection today, I'm going to ask you to put the card in the offering basket. That's part of your offering today also. It's just an awareness of, and again, you don't have to put your name or identifying. We're just going to collect the collective. So Will says that there are basically 2 types of happiness. One is an effective happiness, which is your everyday ups and downs, and there's an evaluative happiness, a person's overall assessment of his own life and his or her own life. And you're going to experience ups and downs in your life, but taking time to evaluate your level of happiness places your focus on happiness and will cause it to increase. So what do we mean by happiness? To become happier, we need to get an image of ourselves in our mind of how our life will be when we are consistently at a higher level of happiness. And we're going to do that as a part of our meditation today. He gives a personal story that he has intended to, he was very overweight when he was in high school, and he set a goal for himself to become, healthy and fit. And one of the things he did was he stepped on the scale and looked down, took a picture of the scale, and then went back and doctored it up and put the weight he wanted on it. I thought, what a great way to do it, visualize, So we're going to be visualizing ourselves as happier people. And the more we visualize ourselves as happier people, the universe will help us move in that direction. That makes sense? So we have a buddy system. We're going to evaluate our level of happiness. And we're also going to do an exercise in our meditation time this morning that will help us to really get a clear image, a clear picture of what that happier person looks like. So we're going to move into our meditation time. Then we'll have music, and then we'll move into our meditation this morning.
Lead me into the light.
Take a nice deep breath now and gently close your eyes. Breathe into that heart space. And as you begin to relax the body pimple, move into a place of stillness, quiet. And take a moment now to imagine and see yourself 6 months from now. And imagine that your new happiness set point is 2 to 3 points higher than it is now. And so if it was a 4 or 5, it would be like a 7 or 8. And now from this imagined perspective, take a moment and answer these questions to yourself. As a happier person, how am I specifically different? As a happier person, how have my relationships improved? As this happier person that I am becoming, when challenges, situations arise, how do I maintain that higher level of happiness? How has my home life improved as a happier person? How have things at work improved? Just to see what that would look like for you. As a happier person, how do I tend to act toward others? And as a happier person, how do others tend to act toward me and treat me? Imagine in your mind's eye, imagine that you found a camera of yourself in this happier state 6 months from now. Photos taken while you're in this higher level of happiness. How do you look? What's your expression? And when you look into your own eyes, what are you seeing there? How do you feel? What's the greatest improvement that you've seen in your life as a result of becoming this happier person? Time now to visualize and see yourself in this place as a happier person. And now just be willing to give thanks, knowing that this is already so. It's already in process. It's already unfolding. And you're moving into a richer experience of your true happy nature. Take a nice deep breath. Gently open your eyes. Take another nice deep breath and be present here and now, knowing that this happier you actually already exists. And that's the truth. Thank you, God. Take another nice deep breath and Well, thank you for joining me on this adventure. Adventures in happiness. I like it.